December 10th, 1993, the release of Doom. Doom is regarded as the father of the FPS genre, starting back in the 90s and continuing with Doom Eternal today. Whether you play it or not, even if you're not a gamer, you've seen Doom even in TV shows and movies. And unfortunately, in the media for video game violence accusations, social outrage, and even the horrendous Columbine Tragedy. How has Doom been able to transcend gaming into the wider umbrella of pop culture? What happened that it became big enough for the mainstream to notice and want to shut it down? And how did it attempt to claw its way back to the top with Doom Eternal some 30 years later? Let's find out. To understand why this impact is huge, we need to learn how Doom got so big so fast. Doom wasn't the first FPS, or first-person shooter, that id Software created. Neither was it the first in general. Wolfenstein 3D, the grandfather of the genre, was released on May 5th, 1992. But it too wasn't the first. That title is often credited to Maze War from 1974. So while Doom wasn't the first, it broke ground in ways that others before it couldn't when it came to reaching the general household. Doom wasn't just some video game. You know Windows, right? The operating system from Microsoft, or influenced by Steve Jobs if you want to go down that rabbit hole, the one that stands strong today and has been a household name since the 1990s, it was on the vast majority of computer systems throughout the past 3 decades. Doom was installed on more computers than Windows. Surely if it was installed on more PCs than Windows, it must have sold well, right? The original Doom sold 3.5 million physical copies and 1.15 million shareware copies from its 1993 release up through 1999. Doom 2, released in 1994, sold 1.55 million copies of all types in the United States during the same period, with about a quarter of that number also sold in Europe. That's a total of some 5 to 6 million sales for the original duology. And who knows how many copies were illegally obtained and traded amongst friends. This wasn't just some random game. id Software was beyond confident in it, as we'll see in a moment. But what makes this fact truly of epic proportions is how a video game was able to transcend beyond an operating system. More people could say that their PC runs Doom than Windows. Naturally, this caught the eye of someone. That someone? William Henry Gates III. You probably know him as Bill. Doom was carving out a huge piece of the pie, and Bill was hungry too. He saw what could be, and he wanted in on it. What's interesting is that id Software employees were reported to be making even around $100,000 per year. When you adjust that for inflation in today's dollars, it adds up to a whopping $192,351.56. How could you not be interested in a project and company generating this much money and social buzz? This impact was so huge that Microsoft was involved in creating their own port of the game, made to run on their brand new Windows 95 operating system. That port's name? Doom 95. Hey, it's original, I know, but it worked, right? To get the word out, Bill even shot a very, some would call it cringe promo video for it to be played at a Microsoft Developers Conference.
Better and better.
Yeah.
Don't interrupt me.
Now, Doom was originally supposed to release in the third quarter of 1993, but that deadline wasn't met, so it came out on December 10th. By December, the team was working non-stop on the game, and a lot of the employees were sleeping at the office. One of the programmers, Dave Taylor, claimed that working on the game gave him such a rush that he would pass out from the intensity. There's no doubt about it. Doom was all-encompassing in the lives of those who worked on it and the general population. It was so accessible. With its revolutionary multiplayer deathmatch system, friends could play together and network in ways that were never previously done before. This game was huge, and one thing was certain. Doom had opened the portal and begun to invade the mainstream culture and make itself known. But how far could it push the limits of violence and imagery? Surely it would come crashing down soon, right? The controversy would hit, and we will get to that soon. Doom had gotten so big already, but the funny thing is, it was only getting started. Welcome to the 1990s, a time when the internet was in its infancy as we know it, a new frontier called the World Wide Web, created by a man named Al Gore. A time when you never shared your first name or picture with anyone you didn't know IRL or in real life. See, once Doom took its foothold, much like the demon on the game's box art, it didn't want to let go. In a press release dated January 1st, 1993, its software had written that they expected Doom to be, quote, the #1 cause of decreased productivity in businesses around the world, end quote, and that Doom was Wolfenstein times a million. This was almost a full year before the game's release. Doom did indeed become a significant problem in many workplaces, both occupying the time of the employees and clogging up the computer networks with traffic caused by deathmatches and downloads. Sure enough, companies and even universities had to take action. Intel banned it after finding that its systems were just swamped. Some people at Microsoft likened it to a, quote, religious experience, end quote. At the University of Louisville, people sprinted into the computer lab, falling all over each other to play Doom. A lab supervisor even had to make a program that would go through the system and delete Doom. Carnegie Mellon University even issued a statement saying, "Since today's release of Doom, we have discovered that the game is bringing the campus network to a halt. Computing services ask that all Doom players please do not play Doom in network mode. Use of Doom in network mode causes serious degradation of performance for the player's network, and during this time of finals, network use is already at its peak. We may be forced to disconnect the PCs of those who are playing the game in network mode. Again, please do not play Doom in network mode." And finally, Lotus Software originally would ban the game from being installed on PCs, but people often ignored that. Network play was banned until after 6 o'clock in the evening. This is really neat, but they actually had what they called the Doom standard to check for PC problems. If the PC had problems running Doom, they could basically eliminate many of their cold questions and get straight down to memory configuration problem analysis. If the PC could run Doom without any issues, then they had to follow a much longer route to solving the problem. Doom would also set a precedent for its future games through the music. It was a forerunner in video game music, blasting with a heavy metal soundtrack as the perfect companion for the frantic gunplay. If the game was a steak cooked no more than medium, then the music is the sauce. Bobby Prince took heavy influence from metal of the day, and some even say he was a lawyer. This gave the players not only a soundtrack that pushed the sonic limits for a video game, but had familiar territory influenced by the bands they loved. The mainstream knew them as influenced by Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Alice in Chains, and many more. Doomers knew them as At Doom's Gate, the Imp Song, Bye Bye American Pie, and other friendly tracks to slay your neighborhood demons by. Doom's music, as with its software's confidence, showed that they were there to stay, gave no cares, and just wanted to rip and tear. Nearly 30 years later, this sentiment carries through into Doom Eternal. The music is Doom. Some people even joke that a soundtrack comes with a free game. It's funny how that ties back into the music influence of the classics and the culture all these years ago. Everything was great, the game was booming. But it could only go on for so long before things caught up with it. Doom caused some huge problems. Doom was at the forefront, dare I say a scapegoat, of the movement against violent video games. Doom was notorious for its high levels of graphic violence and evil satanic imagery, and of course, the heavy metal soundtrack likely didn't help. This generated controversy from a large range of groups. For example, Doom for the Genesis 32X system was record-breaking. Which record? Well, it was one of the first video games to be given an M for Mature rating from the Entertainment Software Rating Board, or ESRB, due to its violent gore and nature. If a mature rating didn't keep you away, Yahoo Games said it was one of the top 10 most controversial games of all time. It was criticized by various religious organizations for its devilish tones and was even called a, quote, mass murder simulator, end quote, by critic and Cology Research Group founder David Grossman. Doom prompted fears that the then emerging virtual reality technology could be used to simulate extremely realistic killing. But one thing happened that, in the eyes of many, will forever tarnish the name of Doom. April 20th, 1999. Doom sparked controversy with the Columbine High School massacre. It was found that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the teenage murderers, were big fans of the game. While arranging their horrendous plan, Harris said in his journal that the killing would be like playing Doom, and it'll be like the LA riots, the Oklahoma bombing, World War II, Vietnam, Duke Nukem, and Doom all mixed together, and that his shotgun was straight out of the game. Afterward, there was a rumor that spread, saying that Harris had designed a Doom level that looked like the high school, filled with representations of Harris's classmates and teachers, and that he practiced for the shootings by playing the level over and over. Now, although Harris did design custom Doom levels, which later became known as the Harris levels, thankfully none have been found to be based on Columbine High School, so we can pretty safely say this was a rumor. Even now, over 20 years later, the violent video game movement still has its presence. Did Doom push things too far? What if its name hadn't been attached to these horrific acts? It is without a doubt that forever in the future, Doom's name will be synonymous with these heinous crimes that never should have happened. Surely these accusations were strong enough to crush Doom's image in the mainstream media and completely destroy its pop culture reputation. But they were not. Doom continued to inspire first-person shooters and video games everywhere. Let's jump into the future to March 20th, 2020. Doom Eternal is released to the world and is heralded as a groundbreaking shooter just like its predecessors. It showed that even 30 years later, the series of Doom was not dead. Throughout the years, Doom 64, 3, and the 2 Doom RPGs were released. The series took its chances on a revival with Doom 2016, which came from the canceled Doom 4 Call of Duty game. Doom 2016 was a huge success, selling 500,000 copies in its first month, and its sequel, Doom Eternal, made nearly $500 million in 2020 alone. The classic 90s versions were still actively being played and heavily modded by the community. Doom was back, but did it ever die? It was back, yes. Just in time for internet outrage. There is a NPC or non-playable character voice line in Doom Eternal that says,
"Remember, demon can be an offensive term. Refer to them as mortally challenged."
When the game released, people took to Twitter to air their grievances with this statement. On one side, attacking the line, players felt it was poking fun at a group of people. The other, defending the line, said it was a joke meant for humor and not for harm. I think we can agree that making fun of someone is not the way to go, but there was disagreement on if this line was just a playful joke or a jab. Ultimately, this blew over as much internet drama does, and the game continued to push to success. While not as severe as some of the 90s events, it will still be remembered as a time when Doom Eternal brought controversy, even if it wasn't intentional. Some say Doom isn't as popular as it once was. However, it has left and still continues to leave a huge impact on first-person shooters and gaming as a whole. Even if it's not as mainstream as Fortnite, not many games can say they've influenced the world of gaming, fathered a whole first-person shooter genre, caught itself in the wider net of pop culture for nearly 30 years now. And that, even though the mainstream media came against it, they couldn't rip, tear, nor slay this gaming giant. Cheeky as it may be, they do say that Doom is eternal. Thank you to the channel members and patrons that make these videos and this channel possible. Check out the next analysis video here, where I break down Decino, one of the top Doom YouTubers and players. I'm Allstin. Thanks for watching.